7 o'clock, Monday, September 23rd, 2019. I call the study session meeting of the Waverly City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Bergen.
Here.
Streethouse.
Here.
Kangas.
Here.
McKenzie.
Here.
Ruffey.
Here.
Share.
Present.
Waltzman. Yes.
And our guest council person, Mr. Lenz, is here to share his expertise with us this evening. So, item number 1 is approval of the agenda as presented. Entertain a motion.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Council discussion. All those in favor of the agenda as presented, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Agenda is approved as presented. Next item is approve the September 9th, 2019 regular meeting minutes. Entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the minutes for the 9th of September.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any council discussion? Hearing none, everyone approving the September 2019 regular meeting minutes, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item is public comments for any items that are not on the agenda. Anyone here that has? Seeing none, we'll move on to the study session calendar. Update, number 1 item is an update from the Upper Cedar Watershed Management Improvement Authority.
That's me.
Dr. Bain, that's you, okay?
And so you're up there, and you've got it on your
Yep.
screens too. Okay. Okay. Well, we all like to think of the Cedar River as looking like this. The reason for the Upper Cedar Watershed Management Improvement Authority is something I'm going to talk about. It relates to that. And one of the questions that you might have is, why haven't you heard from me before? Because I've been involved with this since 2012. And the answer is I used to report to the Disaster Coordinating Committee, whatever it was, and then they got shifted off, and somehow or other my report never showed up again. So anyway, I'm back at it again, I guess. And I'll find where I am. Anyway, we like to think of the river the way you saw it the first time, not this one. And this was in 2008, and this was the reason why such a thing as I'm involved with exists. The Upper Cedar Watershed Management Improvement Authority, nice long name. Actually, according to the state of Iowa, we have watershed management authorities, and we were the second one to be created in the state in 2012. After the legislature approved these in 2010 after the 2008 flood. And pardon me, I've been rushing here. The map, well, you can see the details of this and just briefly run through that. I'll let you read it yourself. And But I've been the representative since this was formed. The Upper Cedar Watershed is shown here on this map. And the actual drawing on the left is the cover page of the report, which can be found online through the Floyd County website. And the watershed itself is shown, the upper part of it's in Minnesota. And I will come back and talk about some aspects of these two figures in just a minute. We participate in this with 7 counties and the soil and water conservation districts in those counties and 10 cities. And we're the southernmost of the cities in the watershed. As I said, I've been representative from Waverly since 2012. And I just finished a couple of years as chair of the Upper Cedar Watershed Management Improvement Authority. The alternates have been Kip Ledage and Ron Lenth, and I am alternates from them from their respective county and watershed, and that's been true for the whole period of time as well. The reasons for our existence have to do with flooding, those first 2 slides you saw, And water quality. I don't think I need to say too much about flooding to you. A little bit about water quality. It's kind of interesting that according to the state figures, the only unimpaired section of the Upper Cedar is from here to the Nashua, which I don't believe, but that's the data they have. There's also concern, obviously, about the dissolved nitrate coming out of watersheds like ours into the Mississippi and contributing to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, other agrochemicals, both rural and urban. The interesting thing is that anything we do to improve water quality also reduces flooding, and pretty much vice versa. So it's a nice in that sense. Other than that, it's a pain.
What's the definition of an unimpaired section? Good fishing, safe swimming, things like that. Okay, that's in terms of water flow. It's not in terms of water quality.
No, in terms of it's
In terms of water quality.
water quality.
Okay.
Yeah, water flow would be a totally different issue. I can't tell you how many impoundments there are north of here, but there are several. One of the things we're focusing on is encouraging the use of what are called best management practices, and if you read into the literature, you'll come across this acronym BMPs, and that's what they're talking about. But they're basically structural sorts of things that slow the rate of stormwater runoff, which is of great concern in terms of flood control. And I'll come back and talk about constructed wetlands in just a minute because we've had some concern with doing that sort of thing here in Waverly. So I thought I'd add something to that. Vegetative ground cover, which reduces soil erosion. Various things there that are being done in the area. And various sort of land use things, some of which kind of overlap with the structural and vegetative, I think. But these are the terminologies that the people in the field use. This is not the Upper Cedar watershed, although if you look in the upper right-hand corner, there are a couple of dots and marks that are in the Upper Cedar watershed. This is the Des Moines lobe, if you're familiar with Iowa geology. And this is a series of wetlands that are being developed under a program called CREP, Conservation Resource Enhancement Program. And the Des Moines lobe is the most recently glaciated part of Iowa. The ice went off about 10, 12,000, 14,000 years ago, depending on where you are on it. So it's a very young landscape. It hasn't eroded very much. There's a lot of wetlands in it and a lot of tile drainage, even more so than around here. And so the concern was what's going on there. And so these are wetlands that are being constructed to deal with the water quality issues that I just talked about that relate to that. And I just included this because if you're wondering what wetlands do, oops, wrong button. There we go. The ones that are in the Upper Cedar watershed are the ones on the right side where I put the little lightning flash. Tried to make it dramatic, but you know. Anyway, if you look at the difference between the red line and the blue line, the red line is nitrate coming into these wetlands that have been created, and the blue line is nitrate coming out of it. And I think the idea is you can see that there's been a reduction in nitrate levels, and a fairly significant reduction. They say down in this report, 40 to 90% reduction in nitrate from wetlands. So created wetlands are very, very effective in both reducing nitrate levels, but also in slowing down the rate of runoff. So very, very useful, and very much want to encourage the city of Waverly, anything they can do along this line to do that. Okay, the color coding on this map of the Upper Cedar watershed, Waverly is down at the bottom of the both drawings, and we're in a brown area, which is the least needy here in terms of protection, flood control, and things like that. The dark blue are the ones that are most needy. There are two of these sub-watersheds in Bremer County. Dry Run Creek watershed, which is not the Dry Run in Waverly, but one up comes out of Floyd County, or Chickasaw County, pardon me. And Horton Creek, which is right next to it, which basically goes through the little town of Horton. They both drain pretty much right into the Cedar River. And those are number 1 and 3 out of all the watersheds, sub-watersheds in the Upper Cedar. And this is a little bit more showing that. So I don't know if you have any questions about any of the local watersheds or anything, we can come back to this too. And let's get to
Steve?
this.
How could, if we have those as numbers 1 and 3, worst, right?
I'm right.
And they shed right into the Cedar River.
But the Cedar River itself is in fairly good shape.
Okay.
It's just amazing. I mean, there's a huge dilution effect of the river once these creeks come into it. You don't need to know this, but you'll find out if you don't already know it. I work with diatoms, which are the base of the food chain out there in the river, and have been studying them for quite a few years. And I've sampled the outlet areas of these, and it's just, the water conditions are quite different.
Okay, thanks.
I couldn't download this particular thing, but if you are interested in best management practices and what's going on in the state, there's a map that ISU has in a project they're doing. If you can Google this and find the website, it's fascinating to look at because of what it doesn't show. It shows the watersheds that have had some practices done in them. It's less than half the watersheds in the state, and you know that these practices are just a very small part of those watersheds. In other words, there's a huge gap between what we need to do and what's being done. We work with a whole group of agencies, the Iowa Flood Center, which is the people that produce the maps for how much flooding goes on in Waverly and other communities. We work with a whole bunch of models that different people do for us. I'm not a modeler. Don't ask me anything about how these work. But we work with the DNR, with USGS. The Iowa Soybean Association has been very helpful to us. And so on and so forth. There's a long, long list. IDLs, NRCS, Nature Conservancy, etc. The watersheds of the WMAs that are possible to be formed in Iowa, I'd say about a third of them have actually organized. The Wapsipinicon is organized. The Cedar River is the only river in Iowa that has all the watersheds, all the sub-watersheds in it, in WMAs. To the west of us, the Shell Rock, the West Fork, none of those are WMAs have formed. And I'm not sure what the reasons are. Well, I know one of the reasons is the word authority. It's why we're called the Improvement Authority rather than just authority, because at the time we were organizing, the debate was going on, what's this authority? Is this another government agency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the northwest part of the state has got the fewest of these, as you can imagine, if you know the political situation, and that's just the way it is. Turns out we really don't have any authority, at least not as far as money goes. We have absolutely no funding capacity whatsoever. We're reliant on what funds are given to us. Now, more about that in a little bit. Some recent developments. Just a week or so ago, the U.S. EPA awarded $3.6 million, close to it, to the Iowa DNR to manage non-point source pollution in impaired watersheds throughout the state. And Dry Run Creek, which is at the north end of Bremer County, is one of the 3 in our watershed that will be considered as front runners when the money gets allocated. Been working for the last 2 or 3 years, mostly KIP, Ledage, working with Plainfield to resolve flooding issues that they have in the city of Plainfield. I don't know how much you know about that or not. But as you drive north past Plainfield right now, if you look off the right side of the road, you'll see them putting in a ditch, which the DOT is doing for us. And they're doing that largely because of a modeling study done by the Iowa Flood Center. Fantastic sort of piece of work, and basically convinced them that maybe that work that they did probably had something to do with the problems, exacerbating what was already a problem. In addition, they've had the water quality problems, nitrate levels building up, and they've worked with NRCS and the DNR to plant cover crops in the area above where their watershed, where their water is, their wells are. So, where are we right now? Iowa has a target of a 45% reduction in our nitrate. At the rate we're going right now, it'll take 50 years to reach that, and we need to have reached it already. So there's a gap between our goals and our means of achieving it. And of course, as we achieve those goals, we will reduce river discharge rates during floods. Climate warming is a much bigger problem that we can't really deal with directly here, but each individual person, of course, can deal with it in terms of their lifestyle. And that's basically what's going to happen. As far as funding goes in current politics, in Ohio, about 4 or 5 years ago, Toledo had their whole water supply taken away from them because of nitrate, heavy nitrate and pollution in the Wami River. It's a big city, a really big city, and you don't do things like that to really big cities without tipping certain things. And so as a result, the Iowa legislature said best agricultural practices have to be practiced. No choice involved. Minnesota has instituted mandatory 50-foot grass strips along waterways. Minnesota's way ahead in terms of the Upper Cedar watershed. The Minnesota part of it is way ahead of us in terms of what they can do. And so we are working on voluntary compliance, and it's much preferable, but do we have enough time to achieve it? That's basically, we're looking on the goodwill of people. And right now we see the early adopters, if you know what that term refers to, are doing things, and that's wonderful. But we need to get the rest of the landowners on the bandwagon too. So at the minimum, support the sales tax, which looks like something's going to happen this year finally, and what's called resource enhancement, our REAP program. So thank you. I had to show you one picture of Diet Thompson.
I've got a question. You mentioned about that we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time for what? What's going to happen? Are you talking about increased flood dangers?
Flood danger is not going to decrease. That's my opinion, but I think it's based on a lot of good facts. And I don't know how much longer the fishing industry in the Gulf Coast is going to stand for what's going on down there without taking a lot more firm action. I just, if I were down there, I'd be agitating to do something about it.
So your point is that we're going toward a mandatory.
We have a responsibility to manage the resource that we have, and we're not doing it properly. We need to change the way we've been doing things historically. And it's a hard change to make. I understand that. The most important people in the group that I work with are the Soil and Water Conservation District people, because they're working directly with landowners. And that's the key to the whole thing. I'm not the right person personality-wise or anything else, even though I am a landowner and working with it that way, but I'm not one of the people that's going to make the changes happen, I don't think. That's an individual, it's a matter of sitting down with people, visiting with them several times, and convincing them to go ahead and do that.
I was just going to ask that. What is the solution to getting landowners to adopt this and to move
The best
forward?
management practices have been shown, at least particularly cover crops and things like that, that if you use them for about 10 to 15 years, your need to use fertilizer disappears. You go back to the type of soil that we had when we first broke the prairie, and nobody had to fertilize to raise abundant crops. And the crops that they raised back then, you read the reports, allowing for a certain amount of exaggeration, they were still pretty fantastic. And so we've seen a steady decline in the fertility of the soil ever since then. Cover crops will restore that fertility. It's been shown in a lot of states. If you want to find a really good demonstration of how important cover crops are, go to the North Dakota or South Dakota website. It's just amazing for soil water conservation districts. But I've heard people in Tennessee and Indiana and stuff talking about this too, studies they've done there.
So
And there's studies going on in Iowa too.
looking forward, at what points would you anticipate that there's an intersection of addressing this issue and city government?
I would say you're dealing with it all the time in terms of wetland, incorporating wetlands, in terms of some of the things that have already been done in terms of holding ponds for water runoff and things like that. Those are all good things. The only thing we haven't done a lot of in Waverly is working with permeable paving. Mm-hmm. And it's a very expensive thing to do, mm-hmm. but it's very effective also.
Steve, what would you say are the main reasons why landowners resist using best practices? Is it expensive?
It's not the way they've been doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's the traditional mentality of farmers historically in any part of the world, is once you find some way that works, you're a darn fool if you change. And that's, and I understand that. But at some point, you have to realize that maybe what you're doing isn't working, and that there may be a better way of doing it. And then the problem comes in, once you start implementing it, cover crops have been really difficult the last few years here in Waverly to put in because we've had late growing seasons and early frosts, and there hasn't been time to get the cover crop established. And so a lot of people have tried them and gotten really frustrated. Mm-hmm. And I understand that too. Yeah. But in the long run, it's a way to go.
Is there a profit motive as well? I mean, is it more expensive to do the more responsible conservation?
Right now, there are, NRCS, REAP, various programs will provide funding to pay for at least part of the cost of doing that. So there are costs involved up front. The payoff comes at the end, and it's a big payoff. So it's it's an investment. And one of those things where you invest in it over a long period of time, and then you get some rewards from it if everything works out. But it takes a certain willingness to live and do that sort of thing. Well, thank you for your questions.
Any other questions for Dr. Main? Very good. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll keep it.
I'll try not to be so delayed in the next time.
We'll see what we can do to encourage our agricultural partners to use the best practice for management. Moving on, next item is a presentation by the Waverly Shell Rock Area United Way Executive Director Jill Kroll.
You're fine. Thanks for having me tonight. I was honored to be asked to have the opportunity to come and share with you all a little bit of a glimpse of what the Waverly Shell Rock Area United Way does here in our community. I'm not going to be able to tell you everything. I'm not going to keep you here all night by any means, so I just want to kind of glaze over a few things just to give you a little overview. We've been in Waverly since 1951. We have a board of directors of 18 volunteer board members. We are the Waverly Shell Rock Area United Way, and so oftentimes that's a common question is, what does area mean? So basically that means we cover all of Bremer County, And then we also go up into Butler County, and we cover Shell Rock and Clarksville and Butler County as well. One thing, if I leave here tonight and you don't remember anything else that I say, I hope that you'll remember that 99% of funds donated to the Waverly Shell Rock Area United Way stay local. That's kind of a common misnomer of people. They don't always know that all those funds stay here locally, but they do. 99% of those stay here in our local community. So before I dive into what we do, I want to share a little bit about why we do it. As we all know, Waverly is a wonderful place to live and work, but we do have some among us who are a little bit less fortunate. And so just to kind of frame that for you a little bit, 1 in 6 children in our community are food insecure. 1 in 4 women in our community will experience domestic or sexual violence in their lifetime. 31% of our working families are struggling every day to meet afford basic household necessities. And like many others across our nation, we have a growing number of individuals in need of mental health services. Again, Waverly is wonderful, but the need is real. I see it every day, and that need is continuously changing. A small part of what we do, many of you, what we're most known for, obviously, is our campaign. You know we raise money in the community. You've seen the thermometer on Bremer Avenue. You've probably been asked by us to contribute to our campaign. So everybody knows we raise money. And then we, of course, take those funds and we allocate those out to programs in our community to meet the needs of people through local programs. And so that's a competitive allocations process. Again, we raise about $250,000 a year, with 99% of that staying local. We then take that pool, and as a board, we accept applications for that funding. The funds are raised through workplace campaigns and corporate giving, and then as well as a caring citizens campaign is what we call it, so that's the individuals in our community that support it. When the agencies apply to us as a board, they show us what they're going to do with those funds, obviously, but they also talk about who are they serving with those funds, so kind of demonstrating why that's a need, and then also have to be able to share with us how those funds and the work that they're doing can be tracked. So sort of a return on investment type of concept. We want to make sure that if we are giving out money that really never belonged to us, it's not my money, it's not the United Way's money, it's the community's dollars to be invested to make a difference in our community, we need to know how is that really making a difference. So those agencies have to tell us, what are they measuring? What does success look like? How will the community be better because of those funds? They report that to us on a mid-year basis, but then also on a year-end basis. That mid-year is kind of just a checkpoint, lets us know how they're doing, and then the year-end, we really take a look at what did the agency accomplish, who did they help, what difference has been made, and how were those funds, funds spent? Were they spent responsibly? Were they spent in the way that they should be? But much bigger than that, and what we're more proud of than that, is how we're unique in this community and the help that we provide outside of the campaign. Our office is like a mecca of help. Every day, between phone calls, emails, people stopping in. We also have a really great link on our website now that people are able just to it's called Get Help, and literally they click on it and they can get help through that link. It's really handy. So just some things that we help with on any given day. Referral services are really common. So somebody will come in and simply not know, first of all, maybe even what kind of help they actually need. They think they know that they're looking for food help, and that might be what the surface need is, but there might be a bigger need than that. There might be a mental health need. There might be a need to access employment services or something along those lines. So they'll reach out for that, and we'll make those connections for them on who else might be able to help them. But then as far as some physical things that we also have a diaper bank in our office. It was started a couple years ago by a local Eagle Scout. So we have diapers that are donated. And then he also built shelving in a closet that we have, or I guess it's more than a closet. It's technically an extra office space, I guess. And so we have diapers stacked up in all sizes. So families come into us when they find themselves in a situation where, maybe their finances are running short on that particular month. We're able to help them out and send them along their way. Also emergency food boxes. So similarly, if a person is in need of food and maybe it's after hours or maybe just can't make it to the food bank for transportation reasons, we're able to provide those food boxes. They only last a couple days. There's not a great amount of, they're just boxes, but it'll get them through. It'll get them through an emergency. Then also we typically have some hygiene products in our office that we can help out with. Another partnership that we have is with the Bremer Butler Crisis Fund, which is through the Waverly Police Department. We work with a couple officers there where we provide some funding to them, and they're able to distribute that funding to people in need. So again, talking about after hours, I'm not in the office 24 hours a day. I sometimes get the calls at home on my cell phone, but I try not to do that. So that's when the police department's able to be there and meet that need. Oddly enough, crisis doesn't just happen 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. People have crisis at all times of day. And so by working with the police department, they can meet those needs, they can meet those individuals where they're at to try to alleviate those crises as they happen. Because as we are investing a lot of money into education, income, and health with our programming, we know that a family in crisis can't move into that next step until their crisis need is met. So we talk about long-term change. We can't achieve that unless we meet their crisis need. So we have that partnership that we're really proud of. Another great partnership is the summer lunch program that you may be familiar with. We're in about our 4th year, would be going on 5th year of that. It's a summer lunch program. Just as it's stated, it's Monday through Friday. We run it for about 8 weeks in the summer. We try to get in 9 weeks, but we know how winter took over our summer this past year with our snow days. So we had an 8-week program held at Southeast Elementary School 5 days a week except for the 4th of July. So we served about it was 1,076 meals to over 100 kids in 2019. So it's an average about 28 kids a day, but it really varied. We saw days as low as 8, and we saw days as high as up in the 40s, but averaging out there. We took on over 70 volunteers through the summer for that program, and we were able to provide free daily transportation with 3 stops in Waverly and 1 in Shell Rock every day, thanks to a partnership with Waverly Life Church. Another program we did this summer was called our Christmas in July program. My first year here at United Way 6 years ago, at Christmas I sat down with the agencies and I said, how can we help you? What more can we do for you? Help me understand what Christmas looks like in our community for people in need. And they said, we're actually in pretty good shape. There's a lot of things that happen around the holidays. People are very giving. People are very kind. What we really need is help in the summer. Can you come up with something to help us? And so we talked about it and we thought, what helps everyone? We could do a book drive or a toy drive or something of that nature, but what is it that everybody needs? And we came across hygiene products. They're expensive. They can't be purchased with, food stamps or anything like that. Everybody needs them. I don't think we're going to deny it and say that anybody out there doesn't need hygiene products. So it reaches all populations of people. It reaches our persons with disabilities, our seniors, our families, our individuals. Catches everybody. So we do a drive every July through a lot of our workplace partners, but also in the community at large for those hygiene products. And we've consistently brought in about 5,000 products every year. We partner them with 17 local agencies to get those products out. It doesn't do a lot of good if I have 5,000 products and they just sit in my office. So we get them out as soon as we can after they get in and we get them sorted. And then we also partner with Bremer County Community Partners and we make sure that every school in Bremer County also has a hygiene kit for any kiddos that they run across who have needs in the schools as well. So then back to Christmas, we do also have a holiday help for families program. In 2018, we served 72 families with 201 children through that program. There's a new partnership developing this year for 2019. You may be familiar with the Holiday Shop, which is a Wartburg College program out of the social work department. And we are partnering with that program this year to join the 2 programs together to make both of us stronger, to make sure we're serving a wider range of people. We were each kind of in our little niche of who we're serving, and we've decided that by joining together we can serve people better and more effectively and serve more people. So there'll be that coming. Another piece of what we do is that we are the volunteer center for Waverly. So that can mean a lot of things. That can mean a group from an employer or a church might call us and say, I really would like to volunteer. How can you get us connected? And we can connect up people with volunteer needs. Again, there's a great link on our website too. If you ever can click on it and you can get connected with volunteer opportunities. But also that means we can help out in times like flood, for example. When there's a flood, we work very closely with emergency management to make sure that volunteers are being recruited and placed and managed appropriately and safely, making sure we're putting safe volunteers into homes and making sure that our volunteers are also safe while in homes, so kind of on both sides. Also, there was a thing like festivals coming to town. There was a little bike ride that came to town a few years ago that we were able to help out with. We were able to help place over thousands of volunteers volunteers over that time period. It was really great to be a part of that for the community. And then also our most recent volunteer sort of a endeavor was our Day of Caring, which just took place a couple weeks ago on September 11th. And so some early numbers on that. We had over 70 teams that day completing projects at 70 different organizations and groups around the community, some even for kind of private households. We had over 500 volunteers that day alone. So again, numbers not final, but we know that literally thousands of volunteer hours took place that day to make Waverly a better place. We also know it rained that day, and it made our day a little bit sloshy, and some activities had to be rescheduled. So we're actually going to be out on the rail trails tomorrow. We have 40 volunteers that'll be on the rail trails staining those bridges, as well as a group that's going to the health center to make up their project as well. But we also had some great business partners. Pizza Ranch had an event that evening, and Jimmy John's jumped on board, and some others as well. So we've are already planning for 2020 to replicate the event and make it even bigger. So September 11th, 2020 is in the works. We may be one of the smallest United Ways in Iowa, but I don't think that we are letting that stop us. We like to say we're small but mighty. Like I said earlier, we have 18 board members and 1 staff person, but we really are making a difference in Waverly. We kind of just stand ready, and we can adapt early to those changes as they arise. Just today, we actually entered a partnership with the Waverly Library to bring what is going to be called Warm Wishes. So essentially, it's a coat collection for Waverly, for people in need in our community. It's something that hasn't been done for a lot of years. So a partnership with the Waverly Library that's going to do the coat collection. We're going to take on the distribution piece, and then we're partnering with, I believe, some Wartburg students, is my understanding, to help us get those cleaned, and a partnership with Bremer County Community Partners to help us pay for that. So I think the common thread here is partnerships all across. I know I rushed through that, and I just wanted to give you that brief overview of our organization. I would love to answer any questions that you have, or if anything kind of struck a note tonight that you'd like to schedule an appointment for the future, I'd be happy to do that as well. I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to be here tonight and talk to you all.
Very good, Jill. Just
Thank you.
learned some things that I did not know
Thank you.
about United Way. So, council, any questions, comments?
Jill, do you have agencies that would like support, but you just can't do it because you don't have the funds? And how often does it happen? Do you have to turn them down?
So every year, it varies a slight amount, but I would say the consistent is that we put out our application process, and we receive about, if we're talking number of dollars, we receive about the double the requests in what funds we have available through our campaign. Oh. So the need is much greater than what we are able to meet, and so that's why it becomes very difficult decisions for our board in trying to determine, really looking at that need and where we can really get our dollars invested in the best way possible.
Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that United Way really started out as a fundraising organization, that there were a number of charitable groups that were fighting each other for the same donations, and decided that it would be easier if they combined their fundraising activities into one and concentrated on that, and took care of the funds. Obviously, over the last number of years, United Way has become much more involved in programming rather than just fundraising. Has that been increasing? And do you see United Way becoming even more involved in programming than they have been in the past?
So, yes, on your first question, yes, it is exactly why United Way was created. In a perfect world, United Way would do all the fundraising for everybody, and nobody else would have to fundraise. That model didn't quite play out exactly how it should, because, like I said, we're about half short. So as far as the programming, kind of where the programming has come from, pretty much every program that I've outlined to you tonight has been new within the last 5 years. So yes, that is a very new thing for us. Really what we've decided as a board and staff is that when we see a need in Waverly that's unmet, we want to come to the table and we want to be a part of that. So if that means us having to put extra resources behind it or extra time behind it, these programs, the ones that I outlined, I should have clarified, there's not funding behind those other than like me, my time, my staff time. We don't fund those programs. The funds we take in are funded through gone out through the allocations process. So these are all things that we're just kind of managing. But I would also say that we as a United Way are very different from other United Ways, and that the trend where we're kind of becoming more ingrained in the community programming is not necessarily a national or worldwide trend. It's just what we've seen as the need here locally, and so we've decided to kind of step up and be a part of that.
Okay.
Is there more programming coming in the future? I mean, if a need arises, we would certainly want to be at the table to try to help meet that need.
Well, I think that's the beauty of a locally managed organization, that you can be nimble enough to be flexible and think outside the box and partner with other agencies so you're not duplicating services. So that's, to have 99% of your funding staying in the community is very impressive. So
Thank
keep
you.
up the good work.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? And thank you, Jill, for
Thank
your
you.
presentation, and wish you well on all the endeavors, including the next fundraiser.
Thank you.
Next item, city staff introductions. Garrett, I'll let you do the honors.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you know, the Leisure Services Department has gone through a few changes over the past few months. It's my pleasure to introduce the Leisure Services' two newest employees, Jen Troina and Patrick Rencliffe. Both of them came to us through about 30 applicants each. After a couple of rounds of interviews, they came on board. Jen is our new office manager. She's been with us since June 3rd. And Patrick is the new vegetation management grounds maintenance. He's been with us since August 26th. So I'll have them come up and kind of give a little background on themselves and answer any questions that you might have for them.
Thank you. As Garrett said, I'm Jen Troina, and I joined the city staff here on June 3rd. I actually come from Parkersburg. I live there with my family, my husband and our 4 children. I have been working in administrative assistant roles for about 15 years, and I have some history with the city of Applington, so I'm familiar with how the city operates, although that's a bit smaller of a scale than Waverly. But it's just really been a pleasure to work here, to get to know the staff. Both the staff in City Hall and just the Leisure Services staff has just been a real joy to work with. I've learned a lot about the city of Waverly in a short amount of time, and I'm just really impressed with this community, and I'm really glad to be a part of it and what the future has to hold here. So thank you.
My name is Patrick Rencliffe, and I come here from the western suburb of Kansas City, Shawnee, Kansas. I'm originally from Iowa, and I'm kind of returning back to family here around the Waverly area, and so that's been with the job opening, and then obviously getting it and being here has been a pretty exciting time for me and family. I've been in some aspect of horticulture pretty much since high school, so I've been in golf course maintenance, sports turf management, and then working with the city of Shawnee and their parks and recreation, doing their landscape and forestry division work. So coming here is a really good fit, and it matches a lot of my skill sets. And like I said, I'm just really thankful to be here and thankful for the opportunity that everything Waverly has to offer. So thank you.
Very good. Welcome aboard, both of you. I have not seen Patrick before, but Garrett hides Jen in the corner in the office there, so I have to look hard to make sure she's there in the mornings. But welcome aboard. Council, do you have any other comments to make?
Just welcome.
I always am impressed with the quality of people we get working for us here at Waverly. So to know that there were 30 people who applied for these jobs approximately, and you're the cream of the crop, makes us pretty happy. I think we get some good people working here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is the review of the consultant selection process for a Waverly traffic study.
I'll just come up here and hang out because we got the next 2 agenda items. The first one on board is to talk about the consultant selection process and timeline for the 2020 traffic study. And I think what I'm going to do is have you flip to the last page where you got the map. And so, let's see what we can do here. Pretty much get the majority of this on here. So when we talk about the Waverly traffic study, it's not like citywide every intersection, because that'd be like 600 intersections. We're primarily talking about 3 major corridors. And the map you have in front of you, the color coding, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, this is the Iowa DOT Federal Functional Classification map. And so in red, you have your primary state highways. Highway 3 coming through town is Bremer Avenue. 4th Street is Iowa Highway 116. And then in green are your minor arterials. And the purple is the collector street system. So I've put yellow dots over the existing intersections that have traffic signals, and then I've also highlighted in blue dots our non-signalized intersections that are locations that we think deserve taking a look at. So the timeline for this would be to get a consultant on board so that probably in the December, looking at December 16th council meeting, and we would look at having proposals go out to consultants this week, and we'd probably look at identifying maybe half a dozen consultants to invite. Consultants that we work with. We also would look at reaching out to some other consultants that we feel that this is in their skill set, and to see if they can bring some new insight into Waverly's existing traffic system. So within Waverly, we have 15 existing traffic signals. We've identified 10 other locations. In talking internally with city staff, the one other location that we'd look at adding would be here at Bremer Avenue and 20th Street over by Redeemer. So it's not that we feel anything necessarily needs to be changed, but it would be nice to get information on the number of vehicles, what types of vehicles, and the turning movements of those vehicles. In addition to vehicles, we also want to be able to, if possible, identify pedestrian movements as well at these critical locations. So, not sure if that inspires any input. As far as the locations that we're studying, also on this map, we've highlighted the high school area, high school, middle school, in addition to that, the hospital area as well. Timeline would be to get the invitations out this week, receive proposals October 25th. During the early part of November, meet with consultants, take the proposals, maybe narrow it down to 3 that we'd invite for interviews, and then have a recommendation to council on a proposal by the December 16th council meeting. Actual traffic counting, we would wait until we want to get past winter, so either late March, early April. We also want to make sure school's in session, but we want to get it completed before construction projects may start to impact traffic movements. That not only involves ours, but also known projects that could have a significant impact, such as the hospital project. And so they're probably going to be looking at breaking ground, I think, as soon as in the springtime, probably as soon as site conditions allow for that. So those are things that we hope would not skew any results. On the front page, I think I identify kind of the, like a consultant selection team. I apologize, I had Garrett on there. That was a carryover because I did the ball field RFP first. It would probably be more appropriate to have the police chief involved in that consultant selection process. So, Rich, I know I know this is the first you've heard of it, but
Surprise!
you've got plenty of time to delegate it out to another officer. So we're going to proceed unless we hear from the council that you want to kind of slow things down. But the intent here would be to begin that selection process so that you can then review and approve an engineering agreement in December. That consultant selection team, we would be looking at seeing if there are a couple of council members that would agree to participate in that.
Mike, how does this, how do these corridors overlap with, I guess, what would be primary streets for emergency vehicles? I mean, I know they go everywhere, but they start from a particular location and go out.
Well, I think, again, if you look at the three corridors, every location identified, whether we have an existing signal or maybe an intersection of interest, it's really at where we have the intersections of these major roadways, either collector or arterial street systems. So, you look at, as far as emergency vehicles, you look at where the fire station is, the hospital, and those types of things. So I'm not sure where you were maybe going with this. I think we have pretty good coverage.
That's my question, yeah, basically.
Yeah, so we have 26 intersections that are presently identified. I know that there may be some interest in, well, what about 2nd Avenue and 10th Street? Should we be looking at that one? Because, that kind of being a primary access into the hospital. Although some of that is going to be changing for the hospital, that I think they're moving their ambulatory facilities, and they may be using a different entrance.
Curious why 5th Avenue isn't on here, considering Nestle traffic around the college and then out toward Eisenach, it seems like.
Well, we can certainly do that. So we have a budget of about $180,000. If you take that by, let's say there were 24 locations, that's $7,500 per location. So we can certainly add as many as you want, but it will increase the budget.
It just seems like that's the corridor in that part of town, with some of the growth there.
That was going to be one of my questions, because part of this is kind of trying to figure out, we've talked about with the public, that part of this is figuring out with Bremer Avenue and what the traffic flow is doing, what the Parkway is doing. I think a lot of people have looked at or are concerned that 5th Avenue has become kind of a bypass for Bremer Avenue for those that don't want to get caught on the 3-lane and on Bremer Avenue, that they go up to 5th Avenue or they go down to 2nd Avenue and kind of use that as a bypass through of Bremer Avenue. Right. So getting 5th Avenue on there, I think, would be important.
Have we ever studied 5th Avenue before, though, so you'd have comparison numbers?
So every 4 years, the DOT, they do one quadrant in the state each year. So every 4 years, Waverly gets DOT traffic counts. And so we do have a history of that. So again, it's a matter of how detailed you want to get. Are there specific intersections you want to look at? Do we have an issue today? Or is it more of a, just curious to know what's happening to the traffic counts? So, we have 4-way stops at 5th Avenue and 20th Street, 5th Avenue and 12th Street Northwest, 5th Avenue and 5th Street Northwest. And then
it's 5th Street Northwest.
5th, yeah.
And then, so do we have a concern with those intersections that they should be studied, that we want to do something different? Or is it more of, it'd be more of a interesting.
Baseline or get a.
Right, but we do have counts at those locations from the DOT 4-year cycle.
Mm-hmm. I just think if we're talking more of a comprehensive study, I think 5th probably needs to be included in that. at those locations, at 20th, at 12th, at 5th, and then probably at 1st. Those 4.
Well, I guess my question is just for clarity. So we gather data, numbers on volume, flow, turning patterns, et cetera, and then what do you do with that information? And what does that allow us? What are those numbers and the comparison numbers of volume shifts and pattern shifts? Then what does the firm do with that to analyze it?
So one of those things about pattern shifts is what time of day is the heavy traffic movements. Okay, and so what we want to address is it perception or is it reality? Is it a concern or a perceived concern, or is it really a concern? Those are things, and there's criteria that have to be established. And they're going to utilize, national criteria for taking a look at this stuff. And that's where, you've been exposed to a little bit of this when they talk about accident rates. How many accidents per 100 million vehicle miles or something to that effect. Okay. So that's how they measure these things. You can say, having a couple accidents on a low volume road may be more significant than having a couple of accidents on a high volume road. So, that's what we look at. Now, what I want to talk about too is Bremer Avenue. Bremer Avenue and 4th Street. We want to talk about looking at optimizing the flow of traffic with the signals that we have. So are we doing that today? Or do we need to look at changing the timing of the signals based off of these traffic counts and peak hours and when it's occurring and which direction vehicles are moving? That's something that we want to take a look at. Now, the previous one that was done in 2016 by the DOT looked at it when it was a 4-lane, and then it made recommendations and it projected what the improvements would look like as a 3-lane, okay? But never went back and did a comprehensive study as a 3-lane. This does that. And so it will look at studying the existing situation, what are the levels of service at different intersections along the corridor, and are there adjustments that may be beneficial that could help improve upon that. Now, if you're going to say, well, what is it going to look like if we convert it back to a 4-lane? Well, you know what it looked like when it was a 4-lane. So if you were to say, well, what would it look like as a 3-lane, going from a 3-lane back to a 4-lane, again, you're getting into modeling and projecting what that would look like. So I guess I'd be more comfortable in saying, here's the hard data from when it was a 4-lane, and now we're able to compare it to, here's the data that we have as the 3-lane.
But I mean, does then that give you the option to change timing of lights or
Yes.
look at how turning configurations, or that's my question, then what do you do with that
Absolutely.
information? Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll also study, do we need additional lights? Do we need less lights? Do we need lights in certain locations we don't have, et cetera? So it'll help to model that out as well.
So this is not just about adding traffic signals.
Right.
It's going to look at, are we meeting the necessary conditions at these signalized locations to support a signal? Because you may see changes in traffic flow patterns, like when the junior high closed, the middle school closed, changes in traffic patterns that no longer support or warrant having a traffic light. So yes, we did remove 2 traffic signals in town because the warrants weren't being met anymore. So that can happen. That's usually tough for people to accept, is the removal of signals. But we want to be very careful about also adding signals because we know it leads to driver frustration and it doesn't necessarily eliminate accidents either.
Will it give information about where more pedestrian crossings might be needed or lighted crossings?
So one of the areas that had kind of been looked at for, potentially the need for a traffic signal is on 4th Street at 5th Avenue. So that has kind of been on the radar screen, but there are also things changing. Is the fair going to move out? Does that change? But we have other things that we may need to continue to keep a watchful eye on it. Are we enhancing things with the Memorial Park and the pool, those types of things, as well as are there things at the hospital that their configuration may change, and that may change the path of least resistance for the citizens and motorists out there.
Does it give any advice about speed limits?
That would be in the realm of a speed study. I think what they would be looking at is optimizing the flow of traffic with the current speed setup. So the timing of the signals would take into account what the speed limit is today.
So you said that there was some modeling based on what would happen as we switch from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. Are we going to go back to those studies and verify how accurate they were? So they predicted we would have this situation. Is that what's actually happening? Are we going to have that opportunity to compare the results of that to what they predicted?
It's already there in the document.
Okay.
Yes.
And same thing with some of that projection we're looking at with the reconstruction of 4th Street from Burger King to Dairy Queen, potentially going to a 3-lane setup there. That's going to impact the counts here are going to be on the 2-lane configuration there, but then they would be able to project what that would be.
Well, I just know there's been lots of people questioning the accuracy of Iowa DOT's modeling. It would be nice if we could compare what was predicted to what actually occurred. It would be my hope that those would be accurate predictions and we could verify that. But I think that would be a good part of the analysis done.
Has there been any impact with the pedestrian crossings, like at 5th Avenue and the couple that are on Bremer Avenue?
As far as compliance and people actually yielding to pedestrians, I guess I've seen it get better. I don't know what.
A learning curve yet for some odd reason for some drivers.
There's definitely room for improvement, but I do see people utilizing them. I think a lot of it is if you have good role models, drivers that are actually yielding, and then it's kind of getting, others are like, okay, maybe the next time they'll be the one to be the good example.
There are lots of people who are ready to be the second person to yield.
Mike, you might want to point out to your staff here, there's a fairly major typo in the 3rd paragraph of the cover letter. And, we want to try to present the best face forward here for the city of Waverly. Where it starts, the successful consultant should have. There's only a partial sentence in there. I think that there's a word missing. It says a successful consultant should have prior experience in performing comprehensive traffic studies along multiple interconnected corridors, designing plans and specifications of traffic signal improvements. That's not a sentence. I would probably just connect that with an and.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I do read these.
Yeah.
I will say, too, that I have talked to a number of Wartburg students who cross Bremer Avenue, and they were very appreciative of the flashing lights and that it has helped. It is not a panacea because some people stop, some people don't, but to a person, they have said that it is helpful. And I think that is true. So
the design is great. I mean, they're very highly visible.
They are.
So.
Okay, any other questions for Mike on the selection process for a Waverly traffic study?
Just a quick question, Mike. Some months ago, I sent a suggestion to City Hall, I think probably to James, I forgot who got it, but, and the question was, can we take a look at the lane configuration at Bremer and 4th for eastbound traffic?
Right-hand turning lane.
It seems to me that a right-hand dedicated turning lane would be a great improvement. I just keep watching that at all hours of the day, and there are still people that are probably being held up there who it shouldn't be necessary. I'm guessing that's going to be part of what you're talking about. I would hope so.
Yeah, it's a major intersection they will study. Some of that gets into how you build it, Veterans Tribute's right there, how much can you encroach into that? It is touchy, but yeah, I think they'll be studying.
Yeah, I understand.
And that's a problem intersection, particularly also when you're coming from the north. It's very difficult. The traffic is masked. Left turns are almost impossible. So that's definitely a problem intersection.
Okay. Nothing else? We'll move on to the review of the consultant selection process for a new youth ball field sports complex located on the north side of the Cedar River Parkway near the Waverly Soccer Complex. Mike, is that your?
Yes, and I'm going to first direct you to the second page of the agenda memo that has the schedule on it, because I think one of the major questions is, why is this being discussed now? And what we need to do is look at the schedule and kind of work our way backwards. So right now we have a task force that is focusing in on the site north of the soccer complex, and they're going to be presenting a recommendation with some detail in October. And so this looks a little bit like the cart is getting in front of the horse here, that we're talking about consultant selection. But we have to look at, if the recommendation is approved by council and you want to move forward as quickly as possible, then the goal that we're attempting to achieve is to have the site grading and seeding done by September 1st of next year. Okay? So from that point, we start working our way backwards in time. And if we look at needing about 2 months to do the grading and seeding, that's August and July. And then we don't want to be bidding the project in July, so you want to have a cushion and flexibility for the contractor to be able to schedule the work. So let's back up 2 more months. Now we're into June and May. So May is the point in time which you would want to allow them the opportunity to potentially start work. And so then we have to back up through a 2-month public hearing, bidding, and letting schedule. So that gets us into April and March. So you're going to be bidding a project in March. And so you got to give a consultant 2 to 3 month window to prepare construction plans and specifications. So that takes us back up into December. So getting a consultant on board in December would necessitate that we start the consultant selection process now. So if we send out requests for proposals this week, be following the same schedule as the traffic study, that October 25th proposals would be due, consultant selection committee in November, with a recommendation and a professional services agreement coming to council December 16th. Okay. Now, you're not going to be approving an actual agreement or committing to move forward with the expenditure of a consultant until the middle of December. So the task force is going to be presenting at the end of October, and you have a month and a half to decide whether or not you want to proceed forward with the project before you would be actually looking at taking action to approve a professional services agreement.
And the way I'm reading this, that there aren't any costs incurred during that time either, correct?
That's correct. Okay. So we have an idea of, based off of the concept, and now we're going to flip to the sheet that shows the layout of the facility. And we know quite a bit about the features of this facility as it is today. We know, for instance, that coming across this direction here, so the north 3 diamonds and the east 3 diamonds, there's only about 3 foot of elevation difference across those entire 6 fields. We know that the majority of the elevation is right here where this parking lot is. This is where that hill is located. And so the thought process on this is that we have 3 phases or 3 stages of developing this facility. Stage 1 is site grading. So get the site level, graded and seeded for the diamonds and the parking, rough graded for the parking facility. Stage 2 is developing the parking facilities and any flat work involved. In stage 3, think of vertical infrastructure, fencing, concessions, restrooms, press boxes, bleachers, those types of vertical infrastructure. So what this proposal is going to address is stage 1 and stage 2. So site grading, underground work for like water and sewer service, getting utilities in, and getting it seeded down by September 1st. That's stage 1. Stage 2, which may very well be a totally separate contract, is for doing these parking facilities and maybe some trail construction and other hardscaping of the facility. So that's what this proposal addresses. Now, we've identified several areas of expertise that we're going to want to be looking for. So when we get into the proposal, and I think we'll look at paragraph 3 again to see if there's
Looks okay to me.
Looks okay. That one's okay. All right. But we get down to looking at the services. We want to identify a civil engineering firm that, because this is primarily developing plans and specifications for site grading, seating, and then parking facilities. So we need a firm that is knowledgeable in an outdoor athletic complex design and site grading. Surveying, we think that this is an ideal location so that you can use GPS equipment on the dozers and graders to make it quick and efficient and very accurate in doing that work. Doing water and sewer main, basically bringing services into the facilities that need those. Looking at constructing a well and irrigation system for the athletic facilities. So we need that expertise as well. Pedestrian trail design. And here's where we get into something that's a little bit of interest here. SRF water quality program. You've heard me talk about that before at the wastewater treatment facility and how our local water quality project that we had identified was going to be doing wetlands on the east side of town. IDALS had done some reconnaissance work that had come up with 5 or 6 locations that they thought would be a nice series of wetlands on that watershed. And then when they started getting into doing more detailed investigation, that whole project along that watershed kind of fizzled. And so that left us, what are we going to do now? And that's where a month ago I said, we may have a project coming that we think is an eligible project. And that is building the parking facilities with permeable pavement and doing our stormwater management with engineered bioswales that these would be potentially eligible for that local water quality program. And we talked about upwards of $900,000 in funds being available for that local water quality project. So that program may fund the construction of hard surface parking facilities at this complex, both on the south side and north side of the complex, as well as all of the stormwater management on the site. And so I have information on the permeable pavers, parking facilities, and what I want to point you to here is you see that down here it's got that SRF program logo. If you go onto the SRF site, they talk about developing parking facilities and streets and others. So we think that this is going to be considered an eligible project for these funds. So what does a permeable parking lot look like? And so this is how it's layered. Going from the bottom up, you have a very coarse aggregate, and then you get into a layer of a smaller aggregate, then you get into more of like our seal coat chips. It's more like a pea gravel, and then you've got the pavers up on top, and you have a collection system with drain tile underneath. So we're on that drawing, it shows the stormwater management. These are not like permanent wet ponds. What we're envisioning is an engineered bioswale. So it, and we call them engineered because of what is below the ground.
And where would those be again, Mike?
Everywhere that
blue areas.
you see
Okay.
kind of a bluish area that looks like, you know, these aren't ponds. Okay, they're you know, engineered bioswales. So you have a collection system underneath. So you're promoting, as Dr. Main was indicating, you want to slow the water down. You want to try to get it infiltrate, and so. Basically, once the infiltration is saturated, then it's going to have this collection system that is going to route it through some other stormwater management facilities we have before it gets to the river. Up on top, it's going to look more like a rain garden or prairie. Designed as attractive flower gardens with native plants and grasses, so that may be what you see up on top.
Mike, going in a little bit of a different direction, but I think I might as well ask it now. I've had some citizens ask about, and I think there's a rumor floating around out there that this area would not accommodate the parking that would be needed. Can you talk a little bit about the parking spaces here and what kind of, calculations are used to estimate the parking capacity that would be needed?
Well, we've got some other displays for that, but going back to 2001 when the city acquired this, we were already looking at how do we, if there's larger tournaments, how do the soccer complex and the ball field complex, how can they work together and share overflow parking if there are some of these larger tournaments. And so that was even incorporated into the design of the Cedar River Parkway. When we were going through the planning process, we're looking at, do we try to do a pedestrian underpass and take the road up and over, or do we do an at-grade crossing? And so the thing about the pedestrian underpass is you really have to fence the entire corridor to corral people to utilize it. Otherwise, they'll just shortcut over the top. In the end, what we chose to do was to develop designated pedestrian crossings on the Parkway, and you'll see those. Again, we got the enhanced flashing beacons. We just got done talking about Bremer Avenue up by Duos. We already have those enhanced pedestrian crossings at First Street Southeast and in this location over here. And that was done with the intent that if we develop, if this does ever develop, that you'd be able to share parking facilities.
Much faster speed limit, though, bouncing around here on topics, but I mean, those lights and crosswalks are great, but the speed limit's 45 miles an hour.
Depends on your traffic count. We're using them successfully on Bremer Avenue, 15,000 vehicles a day. We're not anywhere near that down here. So it's something that certainly we need to watch. You get into big tournaments, you may have to supplement with additional signage, or even having some people that are able to provide traffic control. Just like they do, you think of an Iowa State football game or UNI football game or Iowa football game, you get into these big venues, they're going to have supplemental traffic control provided by whether it be officers or other trained personnel.
Mike, how expensive would it be to have a pedestrian bridge, just for example?
Yeah, they're not going to use it unless you corral them and fence it with razor wire.
You think about truck traffic and how high that bridge would have to be over that corridor.
Okay.
I think it'd be pretty extensive.
All right, just exploring options here. The idea of permeable pavement looks really good. It also looks like it would be labor intensive to lay it down. Is it a lot more expensive than non-permeable to do that?
It's about twice the cost. And so if you don't obtain the SRF funding, we may have to reconsider.
Yeah, I get it.
So we have this, $900,000 of SRF funding. Is this the best thing to use that funds on? I mean, we had this opportunity for wetlands, and we have some sense of the impact that would have on water quality. Is this going to be impactful in terms of water quality at the same level? Is there a better thing to be using that money for to impact our water quality?
If we had a viable project, let's say the IDOL's proposal turned out to be viable, my recommendation would be to stay with that project. So if you had two projects, if this was a viable project and that was a viable project, I would be saying stay with that one because of the impact it may have on our drinking water quality.
But we don't have any other places that would qualify.
Just, I guess, quick question, given the accelerated timeline here and that this is not a budgeted project, where do we see the funding coming from?
We have to have a dollar amount to know that first, and that's what we hope to do in October, is have an estimate, because it makes a difference if you're talking $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million. It's various sources we can look at. Again, the SRF is one thing if it's eligible. It's something that, again, the committee's going to have to look at based on various levels of what we think estimates could be till we get that dollar amount, and we'll have to look at funding accordingly. I was trying to work on that. One of the things that we talked about earlier, too, is I prefer that if we absolutely have to as a city, we go it alone, if we have to pay for the whole thing. And that's not easy right now with what this could be. And again, we don't know how much it is. So anything that comes in otherwise and we don't have to spend, that's extremely nice. But I don't want to start a project and then we end up running out of money and we're stuck. That's why when we did the Parkway, we were looking at possibly funding it over 2 different funding seasons, which again ran into problems with, do we stop construction June 30th because we just don't know if we can get the rest of the money, and the capacity issues. We found a way to get the entire thing in one season at the expense of pushing off other projects. This may have that same issue when we go into our discussions or budget this fall and you start looking at priorities and how do we look at other projects and how they mesh. This may cause those to be looked at a little harder than they would have been if this is something you put as a higher priority to get finished. So we have possibilities. We're still working through the scenarios, what it could be. We've not even talked about, grants. Everybody talks about grants. I don't like to rely on those because they are not guaranteed, obviously, and they're very difficult at times to get substantial amounts of funding. But when you start looking at fundraising, we know how that can go. So we don't really want to count on anything for sure. I want to be able to do this alone if we have to, just like we didn't wait on the Tiger grant for the 4th or 5th time to work on that because it just wasn't going to come. We'll find a way. It just may not be painless if this is a priority and other projects may suffer. But somehow we'll have it laid out to get it done. So if you want it started, we will not stop halfway and not be able to finish it. Because I think that'd be the worst thing we can do. And as Mike had indicated, we do have some other boards. Garrett, if you want to help me out with some of that. When we start talking about this project as a whole, the first one we're going to show you, and you may even walk around and show council, they can look at it after the meeting too, but it's kind of an idea of this area we're talking about and what do we have right now? You have one of the better soccer complexes in the state. It hosts the largest high school tournament for boys and girls back-to-back weekends in the entire state of Iowa. It's absolutely beautiful. So when you look at what you have just south of the road, I don't think people necessarily understand the size of this complex if you haven't been out there, if you haven't participated. And then you have the parking facilities that we were kind of talking about as well. So you kind of see what we are dealing with there already. The second board is more of a blown-up version of what we are talking about, this possible plan. Some of the changes we made, we looked at using all-inclusive playgrounds and move those down closer to the parking lots. And so what you see on the screen is more of an updated version of that. And so you kind of see the field layout, it's very symmetrical. The parking kind of establishes a good flow, utilizing the overflow parking that we're looking at in the soccer complex. And we kind of try to figure in what the drainage may look like, how the fields are turned, all that can be changed. But again, this is more of a blown-up version of what you've seen in the past, so that we can kind of see how this is going to look with these, 7 to 8 fields as we're kind of figuring that out. But the last one, I think, is what really puts it together for us. When you start to look at what does this whole complex look like, and so we hadn't really taken a look at that until we started to pull the entire thing back, and now you see what that whole thing looks like. And you put the soccer complex against this possible youth baseball complex as well. For baseball, softball, and the all-inclusive fields. And it is a substantial investment in the city of Waverly and what we're going to have to be able to accomplish. Further expansion, we don't know at this point. We have some options we've looked at and talked about briefly, but this is where our focus is. So as you kind of look at this, it is a substantial and massive thing to be able to pull out a Google view. If you're wondering where do I have to go play this weekend in Waverly, it's pretty impressive. And so we just wanted to put it in perspective is this is what this area could look like if this is successful and we're able to finish this. And so it kind of helps us to see, what if. And sometimes you look so close to that small spot, you don't realize what else is around it. If we could pull that further and show the dog park and the Red Cedar Park, this whole area is really designated for green space and park space and recreational facilities just like this. Like we were talking earlier, the comprehensive land use plan, right up there on the wall. It's green space all the way through. It's made for these kind of amenities. That's why it was bought in the first place, for something like this to go in there. Initially, of course, it was adult softball, discussed youth, and then we waited, and now here we are looking at the youth solution. So it kind of helps to show that what it could be.
You might mention too the change that was made for that larger park, the northernmost ball field, can accommodate older kids.
Yeah, that was one of the other things they did is they've stretched the 3 medium-sized fields to be a little bigger. They're 275 dead set straightaway center. That is now eligible and big enough to host U13 tournaments. So that could actually work for what was being discussed earlier. And the larger field is about 315 straightaway center. That's a good size field. So those 4 could accommodate a substantial tournament when it comes to the U13. I don't know that triple S, A, whatever, I don't know what those letters are. But it helps to accommodate that possibility as well, which is something that was a concern. Can we do this? Can we not? They've been able to stretch it to where it does work, slightly tilt them and angle the fields. And so again, still a rendering, nothing permanent, just a possibility. We just want to show you what the entire area would kind of look like and still have some kind of detail to it. Thank you, Garrett.
I want to get back to the speed because the Tuma complex down north of Cedar Rapids, the mega soccer complex down there, they have like a 2-lane county road that goes by them, and I think it's 45 or 50 miles an hour. They don't have left turn lanes at all. They do a reduced speed. Think of like your school zone. When light is flashing, it drops the speed down, and so
Talk about those as well as a possibility.
That's a possibility, but again, I think what we'd want to do is see if conditions warrant doing something like that. We do have left turn lanes along this corridor, so we have the pedestrian crossing is at a good location where you've got actually a protected median area, and we've got the flashing lights. So there are, very appropriate things that could be done if it becomes justifiable in the future.
You also asked about the parking. According to this rendering, it's a heck of a lot more parking than what we have right now in our ball fields. So it looks like it's been designed well.
And if you saw the big overview one, you get to see how you can start to share parking. So we talk about the biggest soccer tournament in the state, I think, high school soccer tournament. They need overflow parking. This is a public facility, public parking. We'd hope that they'd be utilizing it. We've got the pedestrian crossing, the enhanced pedestrian crossings already incorporated into the corridor. We'd hope that if there are large softball, baseball tournaments, that they would reciprocate and that overflow parking could be at the soccer complex.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mike, for the two presentations.
Did our viewing public get a chance to look at these maps that were passed around for the city council preference? Okay. I don't know if we can find some way to make sure that the people watching on YouTube can see those as well.
Take a picture of them and post the image.
Can I ask a really quick question? It's either James or Ann or both, I suppose, since you're both working with the group. Are we getting any indication that, this may be touchy, but contributions promised for Champions Ridge could be or will be redesignated to this project if this is the project, or is something else going to happen with those funds? Don't we know yet?
Don't know that.
It's not really for us to determine. That's for them to determine.
Okay.
All we ever received was numbers. We have no idea who gave or didn't give, so that's really up for that group and those individuals to determine if they would like to see those funds have happen. So we have no real say in that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything else? Move on to discussion of council rules and procedures. Not sure where that came from.
I think it's an action item, isn't it?
No.
Oh, no, this is the one we approved last year.
Right. We did comments off and on about maybe we should be looking at doing some updates and changes to the rules and procedures. And staff, we talked about this a little bit the other day as well, and we had to kind of go back in history a little bit and think, okay, when we first approved these, what was kind of the discussion? And I think at the time it was, and maybe we shouldn't have had this on, we just heard it, maybe we should take a look at it, but going, not to pull back here, but I feel like I'm stumbling. It was kind of discussed by this council that every January, these should be reaffirmed by that council sitting at that time. And maybe that is the best thing to do here. Once we started thinking about it, agenda was already out. That was kind of discussed by the group here that approved it. And any changes that need to be done, whether they're done now, a little later in the year after January, that they would be then adjusted and you would accomplish it that way. But we just had some discussions, some different things that have been popping up that should we have a discussion overall of what our current rules and procedures are, or is this better served for a later date? So I guess I'll throw it out to you at this point, but that was kind of the history of what this came from too, is every January really should be kind of reset or recertified if changes need to be made.
Every January or every other?
whatever you'd want to do. I mean, we were looking at every January in case during the year something had decided to be changed, or you can certainly do it anytime you'd like as council, but I see the point of every other, depending if there's a new seated council or not, since this current council set these
It was a big
procedures.
project
It
to
was a
redo
big
them,
project.
so every other might be.
So I'll leave that to you to open up
Suitable.
conversation, anything you'd like to talk about, look at.
I think in terms of a routine review, I would say every other is fine. I mean, it wouldn't prevent us from, if there was something dramatic that changed and we wanted to renew, there would be nothing that would prevent us from bringing it up earlier if we felt that it was necessary. But in terms of just a regular schedule, I think every 2 years to coincide with elections is probably a good way to do it.
Yeah, but I think at this point, having this council discuss our procedures is probably premature. We need to wait until the new council is seated and see how that is made up and discuss that. I've got a couple of things in here that I think maybe should be looked at, but I think it's probably premature to discuss them tonight.
Okay.
Plus the fact that we're looking at 8:35, and we still have a lot of work to do.
It's not that much, actually, we'll be all right.
All right.
And that was our point. Staff had nothing in particular that we were pushing to have done or looked at in a sense. We just wanted to give council that opportunity. We know there's been some comments that we should maybe take a look at these at some point and establish again when that routine would be is helpful. So unless there's something you want specifically, we do not have to have this topic discussed tonight necessarily.
I read through these and noted a number of typos, but since I've already been criticized about typos, I'll probably just email those to Bill and let him take a look at them.
Certainly appropriate.
So, but there are a couple of things that just in general that I think maybe need to be thought about again, but I think that's probably more appropriate for the new council to look at that.
I think your typo should be taken care of right away, though.
Well, I wanted to make sure that the one on the request for proposal was corrected before it went out in a couple of days. I want to make sure that they know that we know how to prepare a full sentence. So.
No, absolutely.
Okay. Is that the general feeling of the council? Let's wait till the new council is seated, or at least the new year, new council. So.
Well, my only thought is I know when the new council is seated, that's also kind of budgeting time. It's a very busy season. I wouldn't be opposed to having some conversations ahead of time so we know what kind of the rules are that people are watching. But I certainly think it's up to the new council to approve the new rules.
Well, and it's not an emergency. I mean, this one is only, 18 months old? Not even that, so.
No, it's only approved early this year.
2018.
2018. Okay, we'll move on to reports from boards and commissions. Airport Commission minutes, August 8th, 2019. Received into record. Golf Commission minutes, August 13th, 2019. Received into record. Leaves us to staff comments.
As Jill said during her presentation, they are going to be out sealing the rail trail bridges tomorrow. So the rail trail will be closed from 7 a.m. tomorrow until 7 a.m. Wednesday to give them time to get that done and have everything dry. So again, as I stated a couple of weeks ago, please obey the barricades and the trail close signs, because we will have volunteers out there with vehicles driving on the trail from bridge to bridge. So we don't want any bikes, walkers out there.
So Taco Tuesday people may be sad.
Alternate route, maybe.
They may.
I don't think we have any other comments, sir.
Other staff comments? City council comments?
Oktoberfest is this weekend, so hopefully everyone will go out and we'll have good weather.
Do we have any update on the Exchange building And
The update on the Exchange Building is, I walked through about a week and a half ago with the engineer. We just went over a checklist of things that still needed to be completed. It wasn't the final walkthrough, but it was leading up to that. I did not get a timeline as to when it would actually all be done and complete, but they are getting very close. So I'm hoping within the next week it should be done.
and I was asked by someone, Santa's house. So Santa is not moving this season?
It does not sound like Santa is going to be moving this season.
Still at the North Pole. It's all good.
Well, I'm talking about local franchise.
Sure.
That was a decision that was made, by the chamber. It sounds like they are going to keep Santa in Coleman Park for this year, with the plan being to move to the Exchange Building next Christmas season.
And I should say, because of our executive session, I am not going to be going to the bar afterwards, because I find that after an executive session, no one knows when to look for me.
Any other council comments?
A quick question for Bill, if you have the answer. I was on 4th Street this morning, noticed that the residence just south of Grace Baptist Church is off its foundation and up on blocks. What the destination for that property is, or what's happening?
It's traveling to Independence to be a new home over there, actually. That's the way I understand it.
What happens to the lot there, do we know?
The church.
That's the church property?
Yeah, someone may want to follow that house, because I've heard Tripola, I've heard Old Wine, and also Independence, so it's
So far.
yeah, as long as it's leaving, so.
This week it's Independence.
Yeah, mine was secondhand information too. So.
Len, do you have any comments you'd like to make to the public and the council?
Just once again would like to thank you for the opportunity to be here and observe what goes on at the city council, and be able to look at the documentation. It's been very interesting, so thank you for your hospitality and allowing me to be here.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate your service, your attendance. Okay. I'd would like to move into executive session to discuss the purchase or sale of particular real estate only where premature disclosure could reasonably expect to increase the price the governmental body would have to pay for that property, or reduce the price the governmental body would receive for a piece of property. I'd entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Bergen.
Yes.
Zerinka.
Yes.
Angus.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rafi.
Yes.
Sheriff.
Yes.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Let's pull it together.